Hi, it's Katrina. The Egg Cliff. In a small rural Chinese village, there is a cliff that lays eggs. Not a man named Cliff who lays eggs, but an actual rock face that manages to produce enormous round rocks that look an awful lot like dinosaur eggs. Some of them are supposedly as heavy as 600 pounds. According to the locals, it takes about 3 decades for one of these stone eggs to be pushed out of the cliff and fall down on the ground as an almost perfectly egg-shaped stone treasure. It's a phenomenon which scientists have not yet been able to figure out. It's one of the weirdest mysteries on Earth, and experts are stumped. This mysterious cliff is located in the Guizhou province near Guluzhai village. This happens to be the ancestral homeland of the Shui people, who have occupied the area for over 1,000 years. The part of the rock face which lays eggs is about 66 feet long, and a seemingly random part of an unnamed mountain. These stone eggs grow extremely slowly on the cliff face, getting more and more pronounced as time goes on. You can see them right now pushing out of the rock, but nobody knows when exactly one will detach itself and fall to the ground. When one of them does fall down, whichever villager is lucky enough to find it will take it home and worship it. As far as we know, there are about 100 of these stone eggs in the village, kept as sacred objects by the families. The Tring tiles. Hiding in a special cabinet inside the medieval galleries at the British Museum is a set of very mysterious ceramic tiles. These tiles are very unique, discovered years ago in the Victorian era when restoration was being done to the Tring Parish Church. Their importance was immediately recognized, and they were taken away by someone unknown, stashed somewhere safe, and passed down through generations until they eventually found their way to the museum. The tiles come from the 14th century, masterfully created using a technique known as graffito. There's only 3 of these very special tiles. No others have been found in Britain made using the same technique. Some have been found in France, but absolutely none on the British Isles. Nobody knows why they were used at the Tring Parish Church. Even more mysterious is what's on the tiles. Each one depicts scenes from the childhood of Jesus Christ, but the scenes are a bit strange. Actually, strange hardly describes just how bizarre the scenes are. One scene is of a group of children being stuffed into an oven, seemingly by Jesus himself. Another shows him blessing a family feast, and the other shows him performing miracles. The miracles are pretty standard, but Jesus putting kids in an oven is definitely a little off the books. To this day, no one knows why the tiles ended up in the church, or who created the curious pictures. The Kumakivi Balancing Rock. In Finnish legend, the Kumakivi Balancing Rock was created by giants, and while that may seem completely unrealistic, science hasn't really come up with a better explanation. The bizarre Kumakivi rock, which translates to English as strange rock, can be found in the middle of the forest in Finland. It is a massive boulder, an enormous stone that could crush your house, and it's balancing perfectly on another, much smaller stone. It's so strange that ever since ancient people discovered it, they made up fantastical stories on how the stone got there. The ancient people figured the only thing that made sense was giants. However, scientists say it was glaciers. The only explanation modern researchers can come up with is that as the glaciers, which once covered pretty much all of Finland, retreated 8,000 years ago, they carried giant rocks and pieces of debris with them. And as the glacier, which carried this particular giant rock, slowly dissipated, it dumped the rock in the precarious position we find it in now. It was a total fluke that the gigantic boulder ended up balanced on the smaller rock, and a miracle that it hasn't yet tipped over. And while there is no way to scientifically prove beyond any doubt that it was glaciers, it still makes a bit more sense than giants performing a balancing act with stones thousands of years ago. What do you think? The Zone of Silence. The Zone of Silence doesn't contain any strange artifacts, but it's certainly one of the most bizarre and mysterious places in the world. It's an infamously magical place in Durango, Mexico. Radio and television signals allegedly get scrambled when brought over the invisible line into the Zone of Silence. Locals say compasses don't function properly, and some people have allegedly been seen vanishing like ghosts into thin air. This place has been called the Bermuda Triangle of Mexico, and nobody can quite figure out why so many peculiar things happen here. Even stranger is that in 1970, the US accidentally dropped an Athena rocket in the area. It sank in the dirt, and American soldiers had to go dig it out. According to the experts, though, this isn't what makes the zone unusual. The disruption in technology, the disappearances, it's all being blamed on three main things. First, subterranean deposits of magnetite. Second, the debris from meteorites which impact this part of the desert with abnormal frequency. And third, celestial activity, particularly visits from extraterrestrials. Which one makes the most sense to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. The Maya Volcano City. A team of archaeologists recently explored a lost Maya city that collapsed inside of a volcano crater. Like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, a literal city was found inside the mouth of a volcano. Of course, the volcano hasn't been active for a very long time. It's actually flooded 5,000 feet above sea level in the highlands of Guatemala. This city was built around 400 BC and was once a thriving Maya metropolis. There were hundreds of houses, grand temples dedicated to powerful Maya gods, and everything else you would expect in an ancient Maya city. These days, though, it's submerged in the volcanic Lake Atitlan. This city is beneath about 65 feet of water, and according to Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology, it was a catastrophic event which led the city to collapse and the local people to flee. The only issue is that nobody is really sure what this event was. All we know is that something major happened and the mouth of the volcano flooded. To make things even more mysterious, this is the third lost city found inside the flooded volcano. There is also Samabaj and Chutnamit, both of which suffered the same mysterious fate roughly 1,800 years ago. The Anti-Gravity Stone Pillar. The anti-gravity stone pillar in the Indian state of Karnataka is a marvel of engineering. This state has the second largest number of historical monuments covered in Hindu temples, amazing pieces of 12th century Hindu architecture, and thousands of sculptures and carved ornate pillars. But the anti-gravity pillar is absolutely unique, located in the Vijayana Rayana Temple of Belur, commissioned by a king around 1117 AD. It took 103 years to complete the temple, which is dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. Here's why the pillar is considered one of the great architectural mysteries of India. It stands 42 feet tall and is a monolithic pillar carved of soapstone with no base or any kind of foundation. It's standing on a platform carved out of granite in the shape of a star, with nothing to make it stand firmly. It has no support, it's not fixed to the platform with any kind of mortar, and it's only standing on three sides. There is a giant gap underneath it and the granite star. Yet miraculously, it shows no sign of falling over. It's been there for nearly 1,000 years, defying gravity. To put this in perspective, it's like if you stood a pencil almost 50 feet tall on its eraser end, left it standing, and it never fell down. The White Pyramid. The White Pyramid of Xi'an in China truly is the stuff of legends. In the 1940s, a group of U.S. service members reported seeing a pure white pyramid standing roughly 1,000 feet tall. If true, that would make this the tallest pyramid in the world. The issue these days is that nobody else has ever seen it, and to be completely honest, the story is a little out there. In 1945, a United States Army Air Corps pilot named James Gossman saw a huge pure white pyramid capped with a jewel as he flew over Xi'an. 2 years later, Colonel Maurice Sheehan told the New York Times the exact same thing. They even ran an article in 1947. Here's the thing. In the region around Xi'an, there are about 400 pyramids. These aren't like the ancient pyramids of Egypt. They're more like giant mounds of grass and dirt. These monuments were made of soil, sticks, and rocks, and now they've decayed quite a bit. But because of the sheer number of overgrown pyramids in the region, it's not a far stretch to think there could be a giant white one. The big mystery now is that if these U.S. service members really did see it, where in the world did it go? King John's lost treasure. A metal detectorist in England believes he has just discovered an ancient lost treasure on a farm in an old English village. His name is Raymond Koschuk, and he came across a small collection of medieval artifacts from 800 years ago. He didn't reveal the exact location of the site for fear of having his treasure taken away from him by other people with metal detectors. However, he does say the property once belonged to King John of England, and that the treasures he found are only a small fraction of the large hoard buried somewhere beneath the dirt. The legend of the treasure goes back to the year 1216. King John, who signed the Magna Carta just a year before his death, was crossing what back then was called the Wash. This was an estuary dividing the areas of Lincolnshire and Norfolk. Legend has it that as the king was crossing the Wash, he lost a great and valuable treasure. Before he could go back and get it, he died of dysentery because he drank poisoned ale. The treasure has been missing ever since. Some historians say it's just a legend, but John believes it's real. All he's found so far are some random artifacts, things like nails and metal buckles, but he's sure that somewhere down there is a whole heap of gold, sapphires, emeralds, and big, juicy rubies. Mystery altar in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is by far the holiest place in all of the Holy Land. The church was supposedly built upon the very site where Jesus Christ was crucified, buried, and later resurrected. This itself makes it one of the most mystical and mysterious places, especially religiously speaking, on our planet. But in recent days, a much more tangible mystery has been unveiled. Against a wall in the very back of the church, archaeologists rediscovered a stone slab, which was once used as an altar in the medieval days. This slab, which had been pushed against the back wall and completely forgotten about for centuries, was once a piece of a medieval high altar used inside the sanctuary during the main liturgy of the church. The altar was almost certainly part of the main structure sometime around 1149 and was used by the Catholic clergy for celebrating Mass during the days of the Crusaders. In fact, it was used all the way up until the Crusaders abandoned Jerusalem. Afterward, the altar was used by the Greek Orthodox priests, up until 1808. That was when a fire swept through the church, damaged the altar, and it was thrown in the back. It then sat there completely forgotten for over 200 years. The Royston Cave. The Royston Cave is located beneath the streets of the town of Royston in Hertfordshire, England. It's one of the most mysterious caves in not only England, but the entire world. What we know is that the cave is definitely man-made. It was constructed in the shape of a bell, a sunken chamber carved into the bedrock underneath the junction of a prehistoric Roman trackway called the Icknield Way and the ancient Roman road called Ermine Street, which once connected the city of London to York. The cave itself measures roughly 24 feet in height and about 15 feet in diameter. There was once an octagonal podium inside and a wooden frame that divided the cavern into 2 levels and supported a raised wooden platform. However, these artifacts have since decayed, and we don't really know what they were used for. Now comes the good part. The cave is decorated in some of the most chaotic cave carvings that have ever been found anywhere. The walls are decorated in weird carvings that appear to have major religious significance. We see images of the crucifixion, carvings of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Israel, along with images of the Holy Family, Saint Catherine and Saint Lawrence, and other important figures from the 13th century. There are also carvings of Jesus Christ, his disciples, and heaps of saints and martyrs. The mystery is that nobody knows what the Royston Cave was used for or who built it. One of the prevailing theories is that the dark underground cavern was used as a secret meeting place for important members of the Knights Templar. History tells us they had a stronghold in the nearby town of Baldock, and so it makes sense that they had their secret meeting place nearby. However, nobody knows if this theory is true. We also don't know when the cave was abandoned or what it was used for. The Devil's Helmet. The Devil's Helmet is one of the strangest artifacts from the days of King Henry VIII. This odd helmet was actually part of a full armor set crafted by the Austrian blacksmith Konrad Susenhofer. This suit was lighter than most suits of armor back then, with intricate details in bronze, gold, and silver. It was such a valued treasure that Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor, gave it to Henry in 1514 as a gift. Henry VIII is remembered as being a ruthless ruler and for his tumultuous love life in his quest for an heir. He also did the unimaginable by breaking the relationship between England and the Roman Catholic Church when the Pope refused his request for an annulment from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. He broke with the Church and became the supreme head of the Church of England, got a divorce, and married Anne Boleyn. But all that is a story for another day. King Henry VIII also had a famously huge appetite, and most likely had diabetes, gout, an infected leg with ulcers, and gained tons of weight as he got older. The young Henry VIII was beloved by his people and handsome, but as the years went by, his closest friends questioned his mental health, and many of them lost their lives. He had what some historians say was probably the highest sugar content in his diet for anyone in the 16th century. When King Henry died in 1547 at the age of 55, he was just over 300 pounds and very sick. His corpse had to be soaked in perfume before the funeral because it stank so badly. During his years as a fighter, Henry wanted to be known as a brave warrior king and loved new inventions and innovations in armor. He loved this particular armor so much that he started wearing the disturbing helmet with the curled devil horns in court meetings. King Henry even had his personal blacksmith install reading glasses on the helmet so that he could read documents without taking the bulky thing off. After Henry died, the helmet went to his favorite jester, who later sent it to Leeds to be put on display, where it remains to this very day. Coins in a prayer book. At an Irish bookstore in Galway called Kenny's Bookshop, a strange and unexpected discovery was made in a very old prayer book. Sarah Gallagher, an archivist at the shop, was cataloging a recently procured diocesan library when she came across two mysterious gold coins hidden inside the spine of a book. Surprisingly, the coins came from Mexico, and they are made of solid gold. The coins are dated between 1821 and 1947. This was strange, especially since the newly acquired books have little monetary value. It was only by chance that Sarah removed the cover and the coins fell out, and the mystery began. We don't know why these mysterious gold coins were hidden inside a prayer book. Even more confusing is how they made it from Mexico all the way to Ireland. The owner of the store, Thomas Kenny, believes the coins probably belonged to a Catholic priest in Mexico who had to make a quick escape in the early part of the 20th century. But for whatever reason, the coins got stuck in the book, got lost in a church collection, and then the collection was sold off. The Blood Red Sky. In May 2022, citizens in China walked outside to discover the sky the color of blood. The sky glowed blood red as confused villagers looked toward the heavens in amazement. It transformed the ordinary night sky into something out of a biblical horror movie. This happened in the eastern Chinese city of Zhoushan, and while it definitely freaked out the residents who had wandered into the streets with their eyes turned to the sky, wondering if the end was coming, it wasn't actually that big of a deal. There was a perfectly good explanation for the blood red sky. According to weather experts, the fog and clouds of that particularly wet night 1 week before Friday the 13th caused the redness. Experts believe there was a fishing boat in the city harbor with one extremely powerful red light on it. That red light shone into the fog, and the cloud became exaggerated because of the rain and had a kind of prism effect. Because of all the aerosols in the atmosphere, they scattered the light from the fishing boat through the entire sky, turning the sky red. It wasn't an omen of the end of times, just a strange optical illusion that really scared everyone. It's shout-out time! Big thank you to Ivan and Vincent Dorr for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Medieval book coffer. An extremely rare French Gothic coffer dating back to the 1400s was just recently discovered. This extraordinarily rare box is 600 years old and was used for holding books. It was a medieval book coffer, something that a person could pack full of their favorite books, clasp shut, and then carry around with them. It was basically a really heavy Kindle, but a really long time ago and without the need for charging. The mysterious coffer was just acquired by Oxford's Bodleian Libraries. It's the first book box of its kind ever to be held by the library, which has a massive collection of medieval manuscripts. It's not entirely clear where the thing came from, but seems to have originated in Paris after 1491. The box is made of wood, covered in a soft layer of leather, and has a metal lock and fittings. Everything was protected by a red canvas lining that has survived almost intact. There are even leather straps on the sides to make it easier to carry. Inside the lid, there is a woodcut of the God the Father in Majesty. This illustration came from a book on liturgy printed in 1491, which is where we get the original date of the coffer. The illustration was probably meant to provide spiritual protection to the owner of the coffer and to the books and whatever other documents they would keep inside the box. Christina Dondy, professor of early European book heritage at Oxford, said to be able to study something like this is truly extraordinary. This coffer dates to a time when devotional resources were at the intersection between medieval and modern periods, between art made by hand and by the use of machines. Ancient bow and arrow. According to a new study that's just been published in the journal Science Advances, the earliest human inhabitants of tropical rainforests in Asia were packing some serious heat. 130 arrowheads dating back over 48,000 years were discovered in a very unexpected place. The arrowheads made from solid bone were found in a cave in Sri Lanka. That makes them the oldest projectiles discovered outside of Africa, showing that Sri Lankans were the first people outside Africa to come up with long-distance weapons for hunting and warfare. Even more amazing, the researchers discovered other advanced tools along with the bone arrowheads. They found primitive tools for making clothing, showing an advanced and sophisticated civilization here nearly 50,000 years ago. They may have lived in a cave, but at least they could make their own clothes and shoot each other with arrows. Finally, researchers believe these projectiles were used primarily for hunting monkeys, but they also found that some of them increased in length over time, showing that later generations of hunters started taking on bigger game, like pigs and deer. Historic log cabin. In Scott County, Kentucky, a couple of homeowners demolished a historic house that's been around for over 2 centuries. According to Scott County historian Ann Bolton Bevins, the house was probably built around 1787, likely by a man named Israel Grant. He was one of the very first settlers in Kentucky, married to the sister of legendary Daniel Boone. But with the passing of time and as the real estate market grew red hot in 2022, the owners of the home sold the property. This led to them having to demolish the entire house. But as they were tearing the house down, they made a shocking discovery. Hidden inside the walls of the house were the remnants of an even older log cabin. Someone had built this log cabin over 235 years ago, then integrated it into an actual house when they decided to upgrade. Back then, you could more or less stick a flag in the ground and claim land, then build your house out of the nearby trees. And that's what happened here. While you might think that such construction would fall apart, that's not the case. The original log cabin remained hidden, undamaged, and responsible for the structural integrity of the house for about as long as the United States has been a country. To preserve what they have found, workers have begun the deconstruction process, and they will catalog each piece and place it in secure storage until a new place can be located to rebuild it. The Tudor gun shield. In the 16th century, King Henry wasn't the only one who had some cool armaments. Those who guarded the king also had some pretty advanced military technology to protect the monarch. They had gun shields, huge metal shields about the size of a garbage can lid, designed with a hole in its center to fit a matchlock pistol. It was a genuine shield and a gun in one. The personal bodyguards of King Henry VIII would wield these shields, designed to be important for protection, while giving them ample space to line up a clear shot. After the king died, the Royal Armoury held on to 35 of these gun shields, and while we don't know how many still survive to this day, there are at least 3 on display at the famous Tower of London, and another being stored at Windsor Castle. Just recently, one of these shields went up for auction. It was put up for around $50,000 and was the first one to be found on the market since the 1970s. Weird giraffeoid. Scientists have wondered for decades just why the world's giraffes developed such extraordinarily long necks. Now, thanks to a recent discovery of an ancient giraffe fossil, we might just have the answers. Scientists with the Chinese Academy of Sciences just discovered the fossilized remains of an ancient cousin of our modern giraffe. This thing roamed Earth 17 million years ago, and it had an incredibly long neck. To understand what's so confusing about the long neck of the giraffe, we have to look at evolutionary science. Some scientists have always thought giraffes have long necks simply so they can feed on trees. The giraffes with longer necks can eat more food and may pass on the genes to their kids. It's all about improving the chance of survival. But other scientists believe it has more to do with reproductive success. They believe a longer neck is more attractive to giraffe females, and so these giraffes have more opportunities to reproduce. The longer necks also make them better fighters, so they can literally beat away the competition with their heads. Thanks to this new fossil, researchers believe it comes down to fighting. By looking at the bones of this prehistoric giraffe, scientists found it had an extremely thick and bony skull, which is used in vigorous combat with other enormous giraffes. These guys literally beat their heads against each other. So while the long neck may help to reach delicious leaves up in the trees, the real purpose of the long neck may have always been for battle. The pendant. A unique amulet was just discovered in England, and archaeologists have declared it a national treasure. The amulet was found in the UK, initially uncovered by a woman with a metal detector named Wendy Thompson during Christmas of 2020. Wendy was searching for any potential artifacts near a small farm when she came upon the artifact. It dates sometime between 43 AD and 410 AD, or the entire occupation of Britain by the Roman Empire. It has been lying in the dirt in a random field for about 2,000 years, and its date has already been verified by the British Museum, which authenticated the artifact as 100% legitimate. Message in a bottle. In April 2022, a message in a bottle was launched from Hatteras Village in North Carolina. Philip Wise, who had been visiting the area from Virginia, tried all morning to send the message in the bottle out to the ocean with his son, but the Atlantic just kept throwing it back onto the shore. They finally had to go down to the landing marina and throw it into the ocean there. But honestly, they never really thought anyone would ever see that message. And sadly, it was found the next day by another beachgoer. But they added their own message, resealed the bottle, and then sent it back into the ocean. A few months later, in June, the message in a bottle was discovered 700 miles away from where it originally started its journey, washed up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. It was discovered by a local on Tuckernuck Island named Samuel Southworth. He saw the first two messages, realized what was going on, and added his own. He drew a small picture of a whale, folded it up, put all the messages back in the bottle, and threw it into the ocean. Only time will tell if anyone else finds the messages in the bottle. And seeing how unpredictable the weather has been lately, nobody can really say just where in the world this thing might end up next, so keep an eye out. Artifacts on the Titanic. The RMS Titanic sank on April 14, 1912, but the remains of the unsinkable ship that sank weren't found until 1985. These days, the Titanic is sitting peacefully on the floor of the ocean, just off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. Since it was discovered, researchers have been racing to bring as much as they can to the surface, and they have recovered some fascinating artifacts. 7 trips have been made to the ship, with over 5,500 artifacts recovered so far. One of them is an old violin that was allegedly played by Wallace Hartley as the ship went down. At a UK auction in 2013, the violin sold for a whopping $1.7 million. Another find is the bell from the crow's nest of the ship. It was recovered during the initial expedition in 1985. This bell was rung by the Titanic lookout Frederick Fleet to try and warn the captain that there was an iceberg ahead. Clearly, it wasn't enough. Underwater divers also found a menu listing the last meals that were served on the Titanic, which sold at auction for $83,000. They also recovered sheet music played by the musicians, a letter written on stationery right before the ship sank, and even a pocket watch owned by passenger John Chapman. This watch is literally frozen in time. Its hand stuck at 1:45 a.m. as the ship was being submerged underwater. An alligator purse belonging to a woman named Marion Meanwell preserved many of her documents from the ocean, including a marriage license and a receipt for a canary that was traveling with her. There were even vials of perfume that survived. Scientists broke down the recipe and recreated the scent, calling it Legacy 1912, in case you want to smell the perfume used by those over 100 years ago. The Yellow Brick Road. A very bizarre formation has been discovered deep underwater. Marine scientists on board the exploration vessel Nautilus were using a remotely operated vehicle to investigate underwater seamounts. These are mountains that formed underwater because of volcanic activity. They were looking at the underwater volcanoes around Hawaii, trying to figure out the origin of the thousands of potentially deadly submerged fiery mountains in this region of the Pacific. As they were conducting their scientific study, they came across something unexpected. Video footage from the expedition revealed a pattern of cracks on the ocean floor that look an awful lot like rectangular yellow bricks. What shocked the scientists most of all is that these bricks appeared to be perfectly straight, with perfect right angles. This is shocking because Mother Nature doesn't usually work in straight lines, especially at the bottom of the ocean. Everything tends to be random and shapeless. But this one small chunk of area appears to be paved in actual yellow bricks. People are now calling this the Yellow Brick Road to Atlantis, because in all honesty, it does look like a road that once wound through the undersea mountains beneath Hawaii. Nobody has found any trace of a lost city, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Scientists simply say the rock formation was caused by volcanic activity. But all of those straight lines have gotten people excited. If it's not the road to Atlantis, perhaps it goes to some other lost city consumed by the waves thousands of years ago. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Too many viruses. As if the ocean couldn't get any scarier, a new scientific study has found the undersea world is teeming with viruses. Researchers have just identified 5,500 totally new kinds of viruses that have never been seen before. The team, led by Professor of Microbiology Matthew Sullivan, found so many new kinds of RNA viruses, they were able to propose 5 new divisions of viruses. These RNA viruses are just like the West Nile virus and COVID-19. But this doesn't mean you need to panic. There are millions of viruses in the world, with only a handful able to infect human beings. Still, it's always alarming when thousands of new ones are discovered at once, because you just never know what kind of effects the next virus can bring. If you are wondering how scientists were able to identify all these viruses, they had to analyze 35,000 water samples from every ocean in the world. In the water samples are tiny bits of life called plankton, which are the carriers of these viruses. And it makes sense for there to be all these potentially deadly things hiding under the sea. After all, the scientists say all life on Earth came from the ocean, and that includes the pathogens and viruses that make us sick. There is no word now on if any of these viruses are dangerous. We'll just have to wait and see. World War I shipwreck. A shipwreck from World War I was recently uncovered deep in the depths of the Cornish Sea. It was found by divers, with a spooky sea monster guarding the wreckage and its cargo of over 10,000 submerged liquor bottles. It was professional diver Dominic Robinson who came across the shipwreck of the SS Liborn, which sank back in 1918. It was a British cargo ship that had been targeted by the German Navy in World War I. German naval officer Helmuth von Rockteschel gave the order to fire, and the ship was lost. Thousands of bottles of alcohol were submerged with it as it plunged into the murky depths. When it sank, it took thousands of bottles of booze down with it. During Dominic's dive, he found plenty of these bottles strewn about the wreckage, but there was also a lot more beneath the sand that he couldn't get to. It's so far from shore and so deep that it was difficult to find in the first place, and almost impossible to scavenge anything with just his 2 hands. As for the monster that was discovered guarding the shipwreck, it turned out to be an anglerfish. At least that was what it looked like. The thing was massive, estimated at 3 feet long and lording over the shipwreck like some kind of monstrous sentinel. It didn't give the diver any trouble, but it definitely added to the creepy atmosphere of the place. Shipwrecks with gold. In 2022, the Colombian Army shared new and shocking images of the legendary San Jose shipwreck. This famous ship has been hiding underwater for 300 years, known to contain the greatest sunken treasure in the entire world. This ship was carrying riches worth upwards of billions of dollars when it sank back in 1708. The San Jose galleon was a Spanish ship that was filled with 200 tons of gold, silver, and emeralds. As it was leaving Cartagena in Colombia to take the goods back to King Philip V of Spain, it was attacked by the British. It sank along with 600 crew members and its billions worth of treasure, sitting on the bottom of the ocean ever since. Despite the fact that the ship was discovered a number of years ago, no one has ever been able to recover the wealth. Colombia considers the wreckage to be in its territorial waters and part of its heritage. The Spanish want a piece, and so does the company that helped find it. For the time being, nothing can be removed. But that doesn't mean we can't look at it. The Colombian Army just did 4 observation missions using a remotely operated vehicle to see what kind of treasure really is down there. At 3,100 feet deep, they found a ton of it. Cannons covered in mud, cracked pieces of pottery and glass, and also gold pieces. There are so many gold pieces scattered across the sea floor, it's almost impossible to imagine just how much it's all worth. It's shout-out time! Big thank you to Leanne Farrell and Hampus S. for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Town swallowed by the sea. In the 13th century, there was a small English town called Ravensor-Odd. It was a medieval port village located in what is now East Yorkshire. There weren't many people living there, only about 100 houses, but that was ample size for the medieval days. There was a wharf, warehouses built all along the seashore, and it was a truly bustling center for fishing boats and cargo ships. Taverns, churches, everything a person could need. By 1299, Ravensor-Odd would have been considered a successful coastal town. But all that changed sometime in the middle of the 1300s. Scientists don't know exactly when, only that it was swept into the sea unexpectedly and never seen again. It's actually considered by those in the know to be the Atlantis of Britain. Scientists have been trying to track down this mysterious town for decades, but up until recently, all efforts were in vain. Finally, archaeologists found a group of rocks and busted stonework just a few feet underneath the surface off the coast of Yorkshire. There's pretty much nothing left except eroded rocks. Still, researchers like Professor Dan Parsons are convinced they have finally found Ravensor-Odd, the great port city that fell into the sea 650 years ago. The Banana Blue Hole. A blue hole is defined as an underwater sinkhole. It's like a pit on land, only out at sea, and there are a lot of them scattered across Florida's Gulf. They come in all different shapes and sizes, but each one seems to be an ecological hotspot, filled with a diverse array of plants and animals. It was just recently that a team of scientists decided they would investigate one of these holes, called the Amberjack Hole, to see how special it is. They believe it formed about 10,000 years ago. It's about 265 feet deep, and it starts 425 feet below the surface. Only by deploying a submersible vehicle loaded with scientific equipment was the team able to reach its astounding depths. What the scientists discovered, according to Dr. Emily Hall, is that the Amberjack Hole is a hotspot for nutrients which fertilize the red tide. These nutrients actually work to supply the entire food chain of the world. Chemically speaking, the inside of a blue hole is different from the rest of the ocean. However, scientists don't really know why. There seems to be something about a sinkhole that makes it a kind of paradise for underwater organisms. And it's these organisms that supply the nutrients that leak into the red tide, which go on to spread themselves around the globe. This discovery has led to more questions than answers, and scientists are looking forward to doing some more exploring. Cosquer Cavern. There is only one place in the entire world where cave paintings of prehistoric marine life can be found. Oddly enough, the only way to behold these fantastic ancient scribblings is by diving to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea and then surfacing inside of an underwater cavern. It's called Cosquer Cavern, and it's one of the most interesting marine archaeological sites on the planet. In fact, 3 men lost their lives just trying to find the underwater cave. Cosquer Cavern isn't too far away from Lascaux Cave, where Picasso himself visited back in 1940. He was one of very few to ever behold the unbelievable artwork left behind by our prehistoric ancestors over 30,000 years ago. But it was the archaeologist Luc Van Rel who found the Cosquer Cavern 3 decades ago. He came to the surface in that watery cave and gasped in surprise. Not only are the walls covered in seemingly miraculous paintings of aquatic life, over 600 images, but the place was also found to be teeming with artifacts from the Stone Age, things like prehistoric tools. It's nearly 10 miles from the coast and was populated by human beings during a time when the sea was over 300 feet lower than it is today. Sunken Royal Warship. A royal warship that was destroyed off the coast of Britain 300 years ago has just been unveiled by researchers. It was originally discovered almost 20 years ago, but in order to prevent anyone from trying to find it and damaging it, the scientists kept the debris a complete secret. The ship dates back to 1682, and had actually been carrying King James II of England when it sank, although at that time he was known as the Duke of York. Historical records show that he miraculously escaped the sinking of the HMS Gloucester after it hit a sandbar and went down like a bag of rocks. Claire Jowett from the University of East Anglia called it an outstanding example of underwater heritage. It's 28 miles from the coast and was discovered to be rich in historical artifacts. Things like navigational equipment, clothing, and the personal belongings of those who had needed to flee so quickly they couldn't take anything with them. But by far, the coolest artifact of all is a glass bottle bearing the seal of the Leger family. The Legers were the original ancestors of the first president of the US, George Washington. Underwater Temple Garden. The Underwater Temple Garden is one of the most unique dive sites in the world, a literal underwater garden that can be found in Bali, Indonesia. While there are plenty of artificial dive sites all around the world that use monuments and sculptures as decoration, this one actually contains a real Balinese Hindu temple. Even though the temple is not that ancient, it's a pretty wild thing to see sitting on the bottom of the ocean. The underwater garden opened in 2005 and contains all legit Balinese architecture, from the main gate that had to be transported piece by piece and erected on the sea floor, to the sandstone sculptures of Ganesha and other Hindu deities. Unfortunately, this is not a place where casual divers can hang out. The main bulk of the site is located nearly 100 feet under the surface. This means you need some real experience if you're going to be checking out the sunken temple. And even though it's only been around for 20 years, most of the statues and architecture have already been completely overrun by marine life. In another decade, the statues won't even be recognizable because they will all be covered in so many tiny organisms and underwater plants. It really makes you appreciate just how quickly something like an entire city can fade to nothing when under the water. Thanks for watching! Would you explore the mysterious underwater world in search of a discovery? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and come back soon for more videos on archaeological discoveries. See you next time! Bye!